everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pack a Day podcast. We have a special guest here today, and that is somebody who used to wear green and yellow, but not quite the green and yellow that we are accustomed to. I have Kyle Emanuel, formerly of the North Dakota State Bison and the former linebacker for the Los Angeles Chargers as well. Also played in San Diego. So, one of the few guys that's had that crossover. Kyle, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Get some insight from a former NFL linebacker. So, just a little overview here on who you are, what it is that you have been doing, and some things of that nature. So, let's start first and foremost. A lot of people, if they listen to this podcast, they've probably heard Jacob Morley and Ross Uglum, some North Dakota State Bison alum themselves. And that's where you were, and you played. So, some big names, some Carson Wentz types, and also some former and current Packers.
Yeah, I actually got to play with. Well, Billy Turner was my suite mate, so we came in the same recruiting class, and then Darius Shepard was also here. He was a true freshman. My last season at North Dakota State.
Yeah, really good story, really good kid. Everybody always seems to have really nice things to say about Shepard when his name comes up. So that's pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about, you said you were suite mates with Billy Turner. I guess we can start there. He's been a big presence for this Packers offensive line. And Aaron Rodgers pointed out his presence in the huddle almost immediately. Now, I know you guys play different sides of the ball, but personality wise, just what's he like? Give us maybe a little glimpse inside of what's it like to play with Billy Turner.
Yeah, Billy's a unique human being to say the least, in a good way, and I think some Packers fans probably have noticed that just the way he dresses and his Irie piece, all his hashtags he used on his Instagram every single time in his caption. So, but he's a great dude, and his mentality is a big reason why he is such a dominant player. And I mean, at NDSU, no one got by him. I think he gave up like one or two sacks in his career, or something like that. So he was fun to play with. He played right away as a true freshman and really made an impact.
Yeah, and he's done that here in Green Bay as well. Definitely replaced a gaping hole on the right side of that offensive line. Obviously, you're former teammates with a lot of the guys that are going to be playing against Green Bay this weekend, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. And let's kind of dive in a little bit on those guys and what exactly has been going on this season. Because, I mean, on paper, you guys, they are one of the most talented rosters in all of football, and it seems like they're snake bitten as a franchise. And I don't know if you felt that when you were on the roster because it seems like every year there's a ton of injuries, a ton of issues that take place. And the Chargers last year, I mean, last year I think the final record was 11-5, or they finished one game behind Kansas City before bowing out to New England in the second round of the postseason. But this year, high expectations, and they're 3-5, and they have a point differential of 0. So that tells me they lose a lot of close games. And they've won some close games as well. They've finally got some luck on their side on Sunday in Chicago with Eddie Pinheiro missing a field goal. So early in the year, I mean, we're about halfway through the season now. What are some trends? What are some issues? What has plagued this Chargers team outside of the obvious in terms of injuries?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to start with injuries. And it was something that we dealt with when I was there too. It seemed like every single year. I don't know if it's been as much of key players, I guess you could say, like this year, like with Derwin James going down in the preseason. I don't know if we dealt with something like that, but it was injuries across the board, and I think that's where you have to point to early on. But I think when you look at this Chargers team, and I was kind of trying to figure out the same thing, on our podcast, on why are they not winning games? And sometimes it just comes down to a play or two, a little bit of luck, something like that. Last year, if you looked at our scores, there were many blowouts, and we actually went 12-4, and we won a lot of close games. And in the NFL, that's what you have to find a way to do. You have to find a way to win a game, even like in Chicago. I mean, you necessarily don't want to put it in the hands of the other opposing team's kicker, but that's kind of where the Chargers are at right now. So just finding a way to win a game, as simple as that sounds, sometimes it's hard to do. And I think that win against the Bears will do a lot for this team, at least mentally, and getting that confidence of knowing like, hey, we can win games and we can finish this. Even in a game where honestly they got outplayed a little bit. The time of possession was 38 minutes for the Bears, but the Chargers defense did do a good job in the red zone, holding them to 1-5.
You mentioned that confidence. How hard is that to keep? It sounds crazy to think that way when you have Philip Rivers, who's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, Joey Bosa. Melvin Ingram, so many good players on that team in general. But how big and how hard is it to establish that confidence from a year to year basis?
Yeah, it's definitely hard year to year, but it's more almost game to game. When you start to lose a couple of those games and you get off to poor starts, it almost starts to become one of those things, and you hate to say it, but it's hard to shake where you're almost expecting something to go wrong, even if you have a lead or something. You're waiting for that one or two plays to go against you rather than for you. But then when you get on these winning streaks, which I kind of think this team has the ability to do, I don't know if it'll start now or maybe later in the season, but obviously sooner rather than later. Then you get into a mindset of like, all right, now we're waiting on something good to happen. And that's kind of been the difference for this team. And that's why I really do think that Bears win was so big for them.
Yeah, something last year, for example, when you were there, might have been that win at Arrowhead Stadium against Kansas City. I mean, that was a really entertaining game from what I remember from watching it way back when, and some confidence kind of rolled from there. Whereas you guys were set pretty well, I thought, to make a deep playoff run. Just happened to run into Tom Brady and the Patriots. That'll hurt a lot of teams in terms of getting to where they want to go. Uh, Looking at the Chargers defense here, I mean, obviously, I think that starts Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. I mentioned those guys off the top, but is that their biggest strength so far, even this season, with those guys rushing the passer? And are there some other guys that, because the Packers' offensive line this year has been really good? I mean, we mentioned Billy Turner. Elton Jenkins is somebody else that has had a really good year. Brian Balaga, David Bakhtiari, two guys you faced in your career as well. That's kind of where a lot of games against the Packers, it seems like, starts, is how do they get pressure on Aaron Rodgers? But is that on paper, that's definitely the Chargers' strength. Has that played into fruition so far in this young season?
Yeah, and I think you saw it this last week. Joey Bosa really got going. He had 2 sacks, and they were kind of at key times in the ball game. So I think that's something that's going to be it's going to be the matchup to watch in this game. If you ask me, I think if the Chargers can get pressure on a really good Packers offensive line, that's going to go a long way. And not only that, but just keeping Aaron Rodgers in the pocket when things do collapse. He's kind of proven over his career that he's able to make things out of nothing. And so I think you have to look there. I think you also have to look at when the Packers are able to get the ball off Aaron Jones out of the backfield. Checkdowns have been kind of an issue for this team. They're more of a soft zone, I guess you could call, with 4 under 3 deep, and it all comes down to tackling. And there has been times this year where the Chargers have struggled a little bit with missed tackles. So those are two things I think you have to look for defensively for the Chargers to be successful in this game.
Looking at, I mean, you mentioned the matchups there, Bosa doing his thing, and it looks like the Bosas have been doing the same moves for 30 years. His little brother Nick are both phenomenal players in that California area. Both came from Ohio State. It kind of seems strange how they keep following each other like that, but they do. Um, when you look at those guys' matchups against David Bakhtiari and Brian Balaga, and with you having played against those guys at least a little bit, or at least watched some film on them, how do you beat those guys? How do you get around those guys and get into the quarterback's face? Because if Rodgers has all day to throw, obviously any quarterback, but especially one as good as him, is going to pick them apart.
Yeah, Bakhtiari in particular, I remember he's really good at getting off the ball and getting off the ball quickly. So it's hard to beat him with a speed rush because I mean you're not gonna get off the ball quicker than him, and he's already got an advantage being behind the line of scrimmage. So I mean, if you're Joey, I think twists can work well. I think if you get a 3 technique that can kind of take advantage of Bakhtiari's deep set, that'll help out. But I mean, it's going to be a tough game. I think that's what I said. I think it's going to be a good matchup to see. Melvin Ingram likes the speed rush. He likes the bull rush as well. I think you just have to be able to get his Bakhtiari's hands off you, which Bosa is good at with the swipe move, and you see him and Nick do that. So, I mean, it's going to be kind of a back and forth, and just who can take advantage of the other, especially when it starts to get to crunch time.
Looking at one of the other things that Matt LaFleur has done to kind of complement or help mitigate some of the loss with Devontae Adams having not played in recent memory has been getting the running backs matched up on the linebackers. And that's been a really big challenge in the last couple weeks for opposing defenses. Is that something that the Chargers can match up with in terms of matching up with? Aaron Jones had almost 160 yards receiving on Sunday night and was really the go-to guy when the plays mattered the most. Do the Chargers have guys that can maybe match up with that a little better than what Kansas City had?
Well, I think, if I'm just looking at it from, I'm on the outside now, but looking at it from the outside, I think that may be an issue for the Chargers a little bit. And I don't know how much, I don't think they're going to play much man. They're not going to stick many linebackers on there. Chargers had Jatavis Brown, who I think, he was probably the quickest linebacker, closest to a DB, probably at that linebacker position, but he was a healthy scratch last week. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. So I think it could be an issue. You play a lot of zone, but especially in third downs, when you start to bring pressure, sometimes you are forced to play man to man. And I think again that's going to be a key area for them. They have to be successful, and when he does catch the ball, they have to be able to tackle.
So looking on the defensive side of the ball, we talked about a couple different things that could be some issues. But what do you think with this Green Bay offense? This is obviously different than the one you faced when you were here 4 years ago. How much of them have you seen of what they're doing? What's changed under Matt LaFleur, and what do you think is the biggest challenge that they present to a Chargers defense that has had some good moments but also struggled at points through the season?
Yeah, well, I think just the passing attack, the Chargers have done a decent job of limiting points this year, but they have given up quite a few yards throughout there. Even Trubisky, everyone's talking about him and him struggling, but he did put up some yards, and they actually threw for more yards in that game than Phillip Rivers did. So I think just limiting Rodgers' ability to get the ball downfield. I mean, I'm just looking at it again from the outside, but he's been dialed in, especially these last 2 weeks, and again being able to create some magic when things aren't there exactly. So getting him off the field, I think winning time of possession is going to be key for this team to win this week.
Okay, so that could be something that plays into the Chargers' hands. The Packers' run defense has certainly struggled getting off the field, establishing that running game with Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler might be a path to getting them their fourth win of the season. One guy that you used to play with that used to be here in Green Bay is Casey Hayward. And this is somebody that comes up pretty often. Whenever a Packers cornerback struggles, and it seems like Hayward has a big day all the time, he's one of the best players at his position. What's it like playing with a guy like him, knowing that that side of the field is basically blanked off and that he's going to take care of his business? So it kind of makes the field shorter for the rest of you guys.
Yeah, it was awesome playing with Casey. I mean, first and foremost, he's a great guy. He's great to have in the locker room. I know he wanted. I think for the majority of his career, they kind of considered him a nickel corner, and he wanted to be able to go somewhere and prove that he can be a number one guy. And he's definitely proven that. Especially that first year, seemed like every game he was getting an interception. So the corners are asked to do a lot in Gus Bradley's cover three defense. A lot of times, you have to when you're back, you're back. So you can't get beat deep, but at the same time, when there's comebacks and things like that, you have to be able to compete. And I think that's where Casey's really good. He's a confident man, which is what you need to do, what you need to be when you're sitting out there in one-on-one. And he'll also come up and he's a willing tackler, and that's another key thing to be an elite corner in this league.
Yeah, Casey's Twitter account is always a fun follow. He's always sure to remind people whenever they bring up best corners that his name gets mentioned,
Yep.
whether it's by him or otherwise. So that's been fun to watch. I'm glad to see he's doing well. You mentioned he's a great guy. That's something that definitely came across when he was in Green Bay as a player, and it's something a lot of the people around the team and the organization have kind of said the same thing. It was unfortunate to see him go, but yeah, you mentioned that first season where he played the boundary and was incredible. And he's really earned himself every dollar, every accolade, everything that he's gotten since he's moved on from Green Bay. It's unfortunate from a fan standpoint, at least, that it worked out that way for him. But I'm happy for him as a person. Last thing, Kyle, before we let you go, and I did mention several times throughout this that you played here a few years ago, and it was your rookie season, if memory serves here.
Yep.
The Packers won 27-20 at Lambeau Field. Demarius Randall knocked a pass away at the last moment. Just kind of take me through a little bit, couple minutes or a couple thoughts that you have on some of your memories of just coming to Lambeau, playing here, and maybe the game in general.
Yeah, well, it was kind of I guess a dream come true, you could say, to play at Lambeau. I grew up a Brett Favre fan when I was really little. I wasn't a diehard Packers fan, but I was, you're little and you're kind of a bandwagon fan, and the Packers were good back then. So I decided to cheer for them. So I used to watch the Packers as a kid. And, I think Lambeau is so unique because it almost gives you that college or like almost a high school feel when you're driving through like neighborhoods and there's people just outside tailgating, barbecuing, whatever, and then all of a sudden pops up this huge, magnificent stadium. So I still remember that drive through, going to that historic place. For the game, it was unfortunate. I actually got injured the week before, and so I didn't play a ton. I played mostly special teams, but I do remember just the way Aaron Rodgers conducted the offense that day was pretty special, and he was I don't know if he does it as much anymore, but he used to be really good at when teams are trying to sub or something like that, or if after a big play going really fast. He was also really good scrambling, and again he's getting older now, but he still has that ability. And it was a fun game. Unfortunately, we lost. We gave ourselves a chance there at the end, but overall, I mean, just kind of a memorable experience getting to play in such a historic place.
That's Kyle Emanuel, formerly of the Los Angeles and San Diego Chargers, and before that, a North Dakota State Bison. Kyle, first of all, thank you very much for your time and coming on the show today. Second of all, if we want to keep up with where you're at, is there any way? Do you do the social media thing? Do you do podcasting and stuff like that out in LA? Where can we find your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Kyle Emanuel. That's 1 M in Emmanuel, at Kyle Emanuel 51. And then I'm a co-host of a Chargers podcast on the Believe Network. That's BLEAV. And we talk Chargers. We talk a little bit of everything that's going around in the NFL. So enjoying the broadcasting side of it for now. Not playing anymore, but it's a fun way to stay involved in the game.
Absolutely. Well, we're appreciative, and I think you have a bright future ahead in terms of the broadcasting stuff now that you're done playing. But that is Kyle Emanuel, guys. He mentioned at Kyle Emanuel 1M 51. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on again, and hopefully you guys aren't too happy on Sunday afternoon, but hopefully a tough competitive game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jacob.
Alrighty, that's Kyle Emanuel, guys. Thank you guys for tuning into that one. We will have more for you right after this.